The other people who do that challenge will come in and they'll go, oh, I like how you did that challenge. That's pretty cool. And they'll follow you, and then you get them in your group. And if you say a few kind words or comment on any of their stuff, then you kind of get some chats going. It's just, nobody needs to be lonely.
Hello, my wonderful Sage community. Thank you for joining me on the Sage Arts Podcast. This is Sage, of course, and I'm going to be joined today by a really wonderful guest who has kind of an unusual journey into art, as well as a love for communities that she's found through her artwork. So I'm going to keep the preamble kind of short so we can get directly to this really interesting interview. So let's get some shout outs and some links and some business out of the way. First, a shout out to Anka Humpert, who gave me some thoughts on possible improvements for the podcast. I really appreciate that kind of feedback. I really need as much information as you guys can give to me to help me improve and give you the kind of things that you need. So thanks, Anka. Also, Kathy from Flowerton Original, thanks for stopping by on Instagram to tell me how much you're really enjoying the podcast. Those are always really encouraging comments to hear. And then Pat Trantham, you cracked me up. I got this message from Pat shortly after the last episode came out, and the message just said, I am doing nothing. It was after the podcast from last week, which was on the necessity of doing nothing. But I had, of course, moved on to other things. It was a Saturday, and I was doing whatever. And I was like, why is someone telling me they're doing nothing? Did I start a conversation I forgot about? And then I realized, oh, yeah, the podcast. But apparently this podcast episode, The Necessity of Doing Nothing, really spoke to people because, yeah, we don't stop enough. We don't stop and let our brains process. And it was something that a lot of people were trying, like immediately after listening to it. So I was getting a lot of comments about that. And I was going to rattle off the names of everybody who wrote me little comments, but unfortunately, that little list is in my phone. And my phone was in the pond earlier today. So, because the pond was having a little problem and I bent over to see what was going on. And yeah, I forgot. I didn't secure my phone. So yeah, so it has a literal timeout while it's drying out. So I'm sorry I don't have that little list, but thank you everybody for sending me those messages and letting me know how important that episode was for you and how interesting and exciting it was to try to really just let your brain completely unplug. I think we're going to have a lot of great ideas coming out of that. So, and thank you particularly for Pat for cracking me up with the one sentence message. That was awesome. So in any case, I would love to hear from all of you. So continue to send me those messages. You can, of course, leave me messages on social media, on Facebook or Instagram under the Sage Arts Podcast. And of course, you can write me through the sagearts.com website. Go to the contact page for that email form. And if you value what I'm doing here on this podcast and have the ability to give back, you can send messages with a donation. You can find the donation buttons halfway down the homepage of the sagearts.com website. There'll be a Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal donation button. And a few of you have found the recurring donation through PayPal. So if you go to the PayPal donations, you'll have an option to do a one-time donation, or you can give a little something every month. And thank you so much for those of you who've decided to dedicate a little bit of your funds to this project. I so appreciate that. And then also don't forget to hit the follow button if you're listening on a podcast player so you know when the new episodes come out. And of course, share anything I send out that would help other people find the podcast who might enjoy these conversations. So I'm going to leave the business stuff there and we're going to move on to our guest who has found so much joy and connection through community, both online and offline. And she's going to give us some thoughts about how to find community, because I think community is super important for artists, not just for the camaraderie, because, working as an artist can be a very isolating thing sometimes, but also for encouragement and motivation. And she has thoughts on how to develop community and including what it can do for you and what you can do for your community. So if you want to listen with some questions in mind, I would be asking myself how involved you want to be in community. Could you use more community than you have already? And would that be in person or online or both? And what would you like to get out of these communities that you find in? What would you like to give back? So without further ado, let's go check in with our guest. My guest today is Megan Skelton. She's an urban sketch artist working in watercolor and pen. She's coming to us from Ontario, Canada today. Thank you so much for joining us, Megan.
Thank you. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I found you on Instagram, just drawing these wonderful, whimsical things. I didn't know a whole lot about you, so we'll have to get a bit of background. So let's start with, what would you say is your artistic or creative focus in your artwork, and what kind of artwork is it?
Well, it's kind of playful. And when I started art, I figured I'd be in landscapes. That's what I was hoping for.
Uh-huh.
But I can't draw trees. So I
Whoops.
kind of put the kibosh on that. And then I started just drawing buildings. I don't even remember why. It was just things I was seeing around town. And I kind of liked them, right? And then
Yeah.
when they got sort of playful, I liked them more, right? And now it's sort of become, if I can keep it light and playful and make people smile and laugh
Right.
and stuff, that's kind of my goal, right? Because
Yeah.
even when I was volunteering in an art co-op this past year,
Yeah.
and I'll see people in the gallery come in and they'll be standing, chatting, and laughing about my art, like not
Oh,
laughing
cool.
at it, just like
Yeah,
thinking
yeah.
it's kind of not knowing I'm the artist, but kind
Right.
of like, chuckle, and it's like, oh, that's good, that's enough, that's all I need is
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
make
That totally
people
feeds
happy.
you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us where you live, because where you live is important to your work.
Well, I'm in Waterloo, Ontario. It's really close to Toronto. And I do a lot of sketching around town,
Yeah.
right? And try to put some things out there that people are familiar with.
Yeah.
And I realized the people in the community seem to respond really well to my local scenes because they all have a history there, right?
Right. Yeah.
And everybody kind of knows it and spends time there. And the local stuff has taken on a life of its own because it's relatable and it brings out stories, and
Right.
people tell me stories about it. So it's like, it's, what it is, but it's got like a little sort of a playful bend to it, right? Like everything's kind of crooked. In my mind, it's really straight. But then when I take a look at it on, it's like,
Wait.
oh, that's not straight at all.
Well, that's what attracted me to the work in the first place, was the whimsical nature, the kind of loose, very, very energetic movement in these buildings and these, scenes that you have, the people in the flower carts and the cats. And there's a lot going on. There's a lot to look at. And it all just feels really fun and positive.
Oh, yeah. I do try to keep it that way. Just like, no sad music on your playlists. No sad art. It's all got to be happy.
Right, yeah. Very happy, very
Just
colorful,
keep
very
everything
fun.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I've tried doing stuff very neutral and serious. I know there was a fellow in Scotland said, I'm trying to get people to paint this picture I took because he wanted to get some artists doing it. So I was like, all right, I'll do it, because he's a nice guy. But it was a cemetery scene.
Oh.
And it took me like a while because I painted it and I'm like, oh, that's pretty grim.
Oh, no. Well,
So I had to sit and I was racking my brain trying to figure out how to do a cute, playful kind
cemetery?
of, I didn't want it to look like, Casper the Ghost kind
Yeah.
of playful. But it was like, actually it turned out really, really cute. And it was like, oh, well, there you go. Did it. Right? Because it's like, it's still got to be cheerful, even though it's a cemetery.
Yeah. Oh, that must have been a
But-
challenge.
Yeah.
Now, art isn't your full-time job, right?
Yeah. So I was a massage therapist when I moved to
Oh.
this town 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And you have to start from scratch again and rebuild your business.
Right.
So I just got a job at an office while I was going to get my business going again.
Yeah.
And it's 25 years later and I'm
Oh.
still working there. I didn't go back to massage therapy. I know. And it's like, well, it's not what I was expecting. It's just like, it's clerical stuff. But no, I'm kind of quiet. So I don't even know if anybody knows I paint. It's kind of like, oh, yeah. I keep that separate. And I keep my art over here.
How would your family and friends describe what you do in art?
Oh, I don't know. It's funny. They're very supportive, right?
Why is that funny?
Well, I don't know. Like in my mind, I'm still just kind of goofing around.
Yeah.
Right. But, my daughter will always post pictures on her Instagram of her and her friends or boyfriend or whatever
Right.
around my public art.
Oh,
And
that's so
or
cool.
she'll share things she's proud of
Yeah.
on her Instagram site. But they're just also proud of me. And then when I got into the little art gallery co-op, my daughter's like, oh, my younger one is like, you are you're big cool mom vibes, right? Like big points for that.
Nice.
And I was like, wow.
Well, that's really beautiful that you're so supported and they're so excited about your work. Now, do you have any other passions besides your artwork?
Yeah, actually, fitness. I've just been like a health and fitness nut
Oh,
since I was a teenager, to the point that mostly it's all I was doing.
oh.
And, when my daughter was a teenager, my oldest one, I was saying to her, like, make sure you're well-rounded and make sure you're kind of an interesting person. And then I sat back and I thought, all I do is work out and design little nutrition programs and stuff. And I'm like, I gotta branch out, right? So,
Yeah.
and it was around the same time I was going to be traveling. And I thought maybe I'll take this little watercolor class, right? And I won't just be a one-trick pony. I'll be a two-trick pony. So I can do fitness and I can do painting. But then what has ended up happening was we hike and bike and walk everywhere. Like we try not to drive as much as we can. And so while we're out, that's where I'm finding all of this stuff to sketch and paint.
Oh,
so it's
so
like,
it totally dovetails. Into what you're
exactly.
Doing. Yeah.
Right.
And one of my favorite questions, because I think it's really revealing, is whether you're a planner or a pantser. Do you plan things or do you kind of do things by the seat of your pants?
Yeah. I wish I was a seat of the pants kind of person.
Yeah.
But I plan stuff out. I usually have little lists all over the place for like, okay, then I'm going to paint this one. Then I want to paint this one because I'll lose track of stuff. So I have little Post-it notes all over the place going, oh yeah, I want to paint that one and I want to paint that one. And then a new one will come along. So I'll be like, okay, I got to shift that one and I'll do this one Tuesday and I'll do that one Thursday. Then I just know, okay, I've got my whole week. I can go ride my bike. I can do whatever. And I know that I'm going to work on this one for Tuesday. Just makes life simple.
Looking at your work, I would have thought you were a pantser.
Oh, wow.
Because of the looseness of your line and the light.
Yeah, hardly ever.
Very interesting.
Well, and like with Instagram, which is kind of my art home base, I guess, I've got my local community and then I've got my global community of friends, which they kind of came during COVID when, I wasn't I just wasn't reaching my local community yet. And what happened was they'll have challenges where they'll say, let's everybody in the community, how about we paint this picture? And we'll all pitch in, we'll all have different versions of it. And some are like, just beautiful and some are goofy and some are like, just whatever. Some are just a sketch, some are a painting, and we all just support each other. So, so I like to stay involved in those challenges. So once a week I'll do a challenge, then once a week I'll do something local, and then once a week I'll just do whatever I want. If it's a challenge, that's fine. If it's local, that's fine. Or it could be anything, right? Like
I have it mapped out.
Today I painted a coffee shop that's somewhere in, I think it's in Taiwan, and it has like little TVs piled outside of it. It's just like a funny little coffee shop. Yeah, it's very cute. And so it's just like, well, that's what I feel like painting right now, right? And then I stopped under a bridge on the way home and was sort of sketched out all the graffiti under this underpass, right? And it's like, that's what I feel like painting. So but
so
that
that's a little pantsing along the way.
Yeah, well, a little bit, yeah. Right, I don't want to be a rigid person, but in my heart, I kind of am.
Well, that's really interesting. Yeah. And when listeners, when you look at her work, you'll see what I'm talking about. When you wouldn't think that she'd be a planner.
Yeah. Well, and the planning kind of it keeps me on track. So then, if I've done something local, then I'm like, okay, well, now I will go do a challenge.
That's great.
Will be the next thing I do, right?
Yeah.
And any challenge doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think a lot of creative people have a hard time with structure. I think it's very supportive of what you do, and you are very prolific. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, at least you're posting all the time. I assume there's probably more than what you just post. So, so that's probably super useful for what you're doing.
Yeah. I also do a lot of very tiny paintings, right? Like they're like the size of a business card.
How cool.
Yeah. They're like really cute, right? And I think I fell in love with that stuff when I used to travel because you could bring home little paintings when you traveled and you could just bring them home in your suitcase, your backpack or whatever. It was easy. Yeah. So, and they were really cute and kind of just a little impact when you walk around a corner or something. So then that's what I started making. I don't even know why. I just think I was drawn to them. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a little easier to, whip something off when it's
On a business card.
tiny. Yeah.
I
Still
like that.
a
Yeah.
lot of work, but yeah,
Sure,
but yeah,
sure.
but it's not a giant, it's not like these paintings behind me here that are,
Yeah.
massive.
The small size is less intimidating, I
Mhm,
assume.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get talking about your artistic journey because you have what I think is an interesting story. Your coming to painting was completely on your own and had a very different objective than what you ended up with.
Yeah. Well, I was broke, but I was going on a trip and I had an apartment with no art and I
Yeah.
had no money. And, but so I was putting my little bit of money I had into a trip. And I was like, well, maybe I could just make my own art because I can't buy art when I go away now.
Yeah.
So, I'll make my own souvenirs and bring them back with me, right?
All right.
And I had sort of heard of a little watercolor travel journal, right? I think I'd seen it in some like we have CAA, the Canadian Automobile Association, and they put out little travel magazines. And in this travel magazine, there was someone who had sort of sketched their way through, I don't know, Alaska or something like that.
Oh,
And
cool.
they just
Yeah.
had little, they had a little picture of their coffee shop. They had coffee and a little picture of the cruise ship out and they were just kind of very light and playful. And I was like, well, maybe I could do a couple of sketches and do something like that, right? So, but I didn't know what to do, how to do it. So near my home, there was a little sign that said beginner watercolor classes. So there were 4 classes. I went to 3 of them, and then I didn't bother going to the last one. So I just couldn't be bothered. But I was like, I have enough information now. But then, in hindsight, I can see now that what I really was interested in learning was, I think, oil, but I didn't know the different mediums, right?
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
and so I was like, well, okay, so now I have all these watercolor paints and some paper.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll just keep going until I get good at this, and then I'll switch.
Right.
Right,
Okay.
I'll learn the other one, right? Because it costs money to take a course, and I didn't have a lot of money, so
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I better make this work. So I just start sketching things around my apartment and
Yeah.
sketching. I wasn't sketching anything in particular, right? Maybe it was a wine bottle, or I remember trying to do a scene that was on a wine bottle, and I'm like, all right, I could maybe try that. I tried making a few things up, but that didn't work for me. Like, I'm so impressed with artists who can just go, I'm just going to just make this whole thing up in my head because I paint from a picture
Yeah.
or I paint from something that's right in front of me. And so, now I'm kind of to the point that I can like take a reference photo and I can say, well, I like that, but I'm going to add in some lampposts or a couch or
Yeah. Oh, cool.
right,
Yeah.
an old mattress or whatever. So I can sort of play with it a little bit more now that
Right.
as I get more relaxed and go on. But yeah, so really it was just to be able to do a little watercolor scenes from my trip and bring them back with me. But the trip was like only a month away from when I took the class.
Oh.
So I had no idea still what I was doing.
I haven't gotten that far.
So I showed up in Iceland and I'm like, I can't do a thing with this.
Oh. So you did the
But
trip
then
without
after the
art.
fact,
Yeah,
after the
okay.
fact, right? And I even got a little travel paintbrush and a little travel kit. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to do this. But I just was really bad still.
Oh.
Didn't have any, I just didn't have my teeth in it yet, I guess.
Yeah.
So then when I came back, I would look at my pictures and I tried painting a few of those. And it probably took me about a year to get little scenes that I liked. So
And this was
yeah,
because I don't think we mentioned the date. It was 20
2017.
when you took the classes.
Yeah, and went away. And then I just kind of dabbled with it. But then at a certain point, just before COVID, actually, so just prior to everything shutting down, I thought, all right, I'll just see if I can sketch every day. And my daughters were going like, go on Instagram, Mom. And I'm like, why would I do that? But I tried it. And it's funny because if I go back to the beginning of my Instagram thing, I'd have like 4 likes or 12 likes. And I
Yeah.
remember saying to my kids, like, oh, this one went viral. I had 18 likes. Right.
It's all relative, yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Right. And then, as time went on, I didn't know there was an art community out there.
Uh-huh.
So that was a total surprise to me. I didn't even know who I was trying to share stuff with.
Right, yeah.
But then other artists sort of became serious little friendships, which, like there were times in my life when I was really lonely and I would have love to have these friendships,
Yeah.
right? Where we're just
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, you painted that, or you did such a good job, or we'll joke around, and then get little side conversations going.
Right.
But, but when I started, I thought, well, even if I'm not posting a picture, I should say something nice. It's like,
Right. Support them.
so yeah, there's
Yeah.
hardly any effort to just like, it costs nothing to be nice, right?
Right. So that's how it started. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your art is now shared publicly in a lot of different forms. So I find it interesting from just half a dozen years ago to now. It's not just you on Instagram. You've got your work in various public places. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's a funny thing because once I started kind of going with my art, I remember saying to my family, like, I only have two dreams. I want my art in the park because I, bike and walk past. I would like to have my art hanging there. That would be like dream come true.
Aw.
And I said, when I found out that people have art on beer cans, I'm like, oh, I love beer, right? Like craft beer. I'm like, I want my art in a beer can. Those are my two dreams. And then I'm done with art.
Oh,
Then I'm done. That's all I need. And the city put a call in for art and I submitted it and I didn't get chosen that year. Then I kind of got really bummed out.
yeah.
So the next year I told all my support people, I was like, all right, I'm going to try again and make it more of a local scene, right? And, you had to say why it was important to you, right? So I drew the path that it hangs on. So it hangs on a bike path that heads into town through this big park. And so that's what I drew. And I drew these little snow gnomes. We have a local snow sculpting guy who does really funny little snow sculptures around, mostly on his front lawn, but he puts them through the park too, just for fun.
Oh,
and
cool.
just
Love that.
And everybody sees him, and so I drew that. I drew his little gnomes in there, and the little train. We have a high-speed train that goes through town now, and the city in the distance, and the bike pedestrian path. But I told everybody if I don't get accepted again, you have to be there to support me because I'm going to get bummed out.
Need you. Yeah,
and it was accepted, right? So now it's this great big huge banner hanging in the park, and
of your work.
Yeah, I get a little teary when
I
go
would
past.
too.
I go out of my way to go past it, even if I'm not supposed to be going that way. I'm just I go past my art. It's only there for a year. I better enjoy it.
How wonderful.
Right? Yeah. And then for the beer can, it was weird because, like I said, I don't really talk about my art at work. I guess I keep it separate.
Yeah.
But I was talking to my one friend at work, and I said, well, my art's in the park now. I didn't know if you knew that. And I said, my only other dream is a beer can, right? So I said, that's what I have to work toward now. And she said, oh, that's funny. She said, I know these people who just bought a little craft brewery and they're trying to rebrand it. And I was like, oh, that's, ha ha ha. Anyways, and then they reached out to me and said like, yeah, we love your work. Could you draw the village? So it's in a little village outside of Waterloo. And so I drew a little village scene and they put it on their village porter, Neustadt Springs Village Porter. And and then they blew it up and they also have it hanging in their tap room.
Oh my goodness.
It's just like,
how wonderful.
Oh, that's so cool. Right. So of course, then I was just like buying case after every family event, bringing a case in my bureau.
They're like, we picked the right lady. Because she's supporting our business.
And then as soon as the beer can thing happened, then a big developer in town said, we want you to paint all of these big buildings that we're developing, right? So they're taking like sort of old factories and updating them, putting newer parts on them too. And so they wanted them hanging in their boardrooms and their new offices.
Cool. Yeah.
And so each of their buildings, they just have me do. And I mean, they work with architects and stuff. They could get really good drawings.
Yeah, well,
they wanted to support local art.
But that's what they see every day. So they wanted something new and fresh.
Yeah, right. So that was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. So that's in their offices, and they've given them as, gifts to people who worked on the buildings with them. And
that's really neat.
Had me do their Christmas cards of their new office building, right? So it's just like, well, it's just kind of fun.
Well, it's obvious that something about your work is speaking to people. I mean, it's why I reached out to you, because I just felt that there was so much going on, just so much energy and so much personality in your pictures. So I'm not really surprised. It's all over the place. So yeah. Now, I want to get to kind of the core of the conversation, because you really kind of lit up when you first started talking about the communities that you're involved in. Can you tell me a bit about the online Instagram community and what is your local community like and what does it do for you, and what are you able to do for them?
Oh, yeah, the online community, it didn't see it coming at all. You know, this one week I was just kind of having a bad week. My art wasn't working. I was upset about something else in life, right? Because life happens.
Life, yeah.
And so I just kind of went quiet on Instagram that week. And people were kind of used to me posting, a
Right.
few times a week or commenting on their stuff. And people started reaching out, kind of going like, "Hey, you okay? Is like everything all right over
Aw.
there?" And I'm kind of thinking, geez, this is crazy. Like I've gone away on vacation from work before, and
People at work
I
didn't know you were gone.
people didn't know. Right.
Thanks.
It's like not hurt, but it's kind of like, oh, I was just like really touched. So I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm okay. So I thought, okay, well, this is interesting that these people even notice I exist,
Yeah. You
right?
don't always realize on this side
they're
of the
kind of
screen, how kind
yeah,
of effect you're having out there.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
it's like maybe I'm adding something to this little community. We can joke around and get goofy about stuff, and it's more fun than I ever could have imagined. Like I had said years ago, I was just in a place where I was horribly lonely. And if I'd had this community or known that something like this existed,
Yeah.
like that would have made a huge difference, right? And
Yeah.
I remember getting on when I was on Instagram and I thought, okay, these people are kind of fun. And I saw this woman in Wales and she was running a little art and coffee. They were going to get together over Zoom because this is during COVID
Mm.
and draw fancy pajamas. So I'm like, all right,
Okay.
I'll pay £5 for that. And so it's like 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning or something like ridiculous here. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm on a Zoom call drawing fancy pajamas with these people, and they've all got that hilarious British sense of humor, and they're snappy because they've had lots of coffee already, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I cannot keep up. Just like, but it was fun, right? It was just
Yeah.
really, really fun, and the paintings were terrible. My paintings were terrible. Theirs were probably
It
good,
was too
but
early.
it
Yeah.
didn't matter. It just
Yeah.
didn't matter, right? It
Right.
was fun,
Yeah.
and that's when I'm like, oh, there's more to this than I realized. And then
Yeah.
I started hearing about other artists that, 3 or 4 of them would get together and sketch together.
Yeah.
They were doing this on Zoom and they were just all strangers to start with. And then
Yeah.
they kind of were having fun on Instagram. I know Instagram gets such a bad rap with teenagers and all that, but there's this other side to it that people just like, it is a community. And I know there have been, especially now since COVID, there have been a lot of studies about online communities and can they be the same as in-person stuff? And they totally can. And that's kind of how I got to know my local community during COVID through my posts. And now they'll say like, hey, we're going for coffee. Want to come and we're going to sketch together. And so these different little groups around town will say like, hey, what days do you work? And we'll book this on a day you're not working. So you can come.
Oh,
Right.
that's
And
great.
they're kind of like,
Yeah.
want me to come? Which is just so surprising. Like I'm kind of shy.
Okay.
So to go to these things with people I've never actually met in person is like kind of, scary.
You're right.
And then you get there and you realize I know these people. They're fine,
These
right?
are-
I don't need to be scared. They're my friends already.
Yeah. What a great feeling.
Yeah, it really is. But that's what this art community has done. Like for me, sitting by myself looking at my art, I might go, but all of these other people come in and they're kind of like, no, it's good. It's unique. And then, we look at theirs and it's like, no, that's good too. And that's good too. So it's not like everyone has to look a certain way. It's like we're celebrating
Yeah.
all the differences. And that's
Yeah.
what
Yes.
makes it fun, right? Because if we all just were producing the same thing, it would be so boring.
Right.
Right. And it's like, oh, this works with you. This matches your personality. And so it takes away all that negative stuff
Yeah.
that maybe social media is feeding you or it can get in your head.
Yeah.
And it never says you
Yeah.
can improve your painting if you did this. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you can skip over the ads and just go into the conversations, you'll be in a much better place. I mean, it's not like I stop at all the ads or anything, but they're just there, and they get in my head. And I think, you're just being sold stuff all the time, which I understand. It's a business. I'm trying to promote my podcast, or I was trying to promote the magazines or books or whatnot. So unfortunately, I have kind of a market mindset. when I get on social media, which I don't want, and I try to actively shut down, but it's still very hard to, especially when you're seeing people selling to you as well.
Exactly.
So I love that you see it as community and you see it as support and motivation. That's really encouraging for me, just to think it can be like that. And if I approach it in a different way than I am, maybe it would be like that.
Yeah, yeah, like you said, you are enough, right?
Right.
Or
That's what, yeah.
I am enough.
And I
It's
tell
an
people
important.
this all the time, but
I know.
do as I say, not as I do. But we all struggle. And it's good to have the reminders.
Yeah.
Right. Now, how did you find these communities? How did you find the Instagram community, first of all?
I just started posting, and then as artists would follow me, we'd start chatting, and then I'd sometimes read through their comments and see funny comments other people were making about their art. And so I'd chime in and say something. And maybe I was a little braver than I would have been in person, right?
Right, yeah.
And kind of get funny conversations going. And now it's been a few years, so I make sure I make time to be a contributing member.
Yeah.
And the local stuff, I'm making sure I'm making time to get together with people or make it to their little events that they're running. I didn't even know there were little events.
Right.
Like that would never have occurred to me, that people actually get together in coffee shops or little pubs and sketch.
Yeah.
But they do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So just get outside my comfort zone and start, going and participating in these groups. So I guess it's just when you start talking to people and it's like, oh, you're in town. Oh, well, we're doing a thing this weekend, right? So, I mean, some of us are going to drive to the next town over and go sketch together. And so now I've invited somebody to come along with me, right? And she's kind of newer on Instagram. So just pull people in,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Now, you talk about the Instagram people like there's an official group.
Oh, no, just gotten to know each other. And I mean, like, it's to the point that my one artist friend locally, she went over to some other country, and there's artists we know in our sort of Instagram community. So it's not an official community.
Yeah.
We're just a group of people who want to share our art because it's fun to share art.
Are they all in watercolor or sketching or painting in general or any kind of
everything? And so then when this artist from here went over to maybe the Netherlands, she got together with the girl we always talk to over there, and they went out and sketched together. Right? They'd never met before, but they just were like, hey, well, I'm coming to the Netherlands. You live in the Netherlands. Let's get together and sketch. And it's like, okay.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now when we do talk about maybe traveling, I'm like, oh, well, if we went there, I would let, this person know, and maybe I could go sketch with them one day.
Yeah.
Or, but it's weird. I never would have thought this even existed in the world.
It could, right. And I think that's the thing about our world today, because our community is not just local. We have the ability to talk to people literally all over the world. With the magazines, I got to know so many people. I mean, I remember talking to someone in Russia. She didn't speak English and I didn't speak Russian, but we have Google Translate. So we talk, we just kept, it was kind of funny, some of the translations, I'm sure, from both sides. So when I do travel, same thing now, no matter where I go, I'm like, okay, what polymer people are there? And, I ring them up.
Yeah, and so you got that through a magazine.
Through publishing a magazine, yeah. So I was wondering about yours in terms of that, like if it was particular to a medium or whatnot, but it sounds like...
No, not at all.
As long as it's 2D visual...
Yeah.
Do you have sculptors and such as well, or...?
Yeah, I do have a few sculptors. Now, what we've got, like with the art challenges, for example, I did a challenge with a local photographer, and we used her picture of just a heritage building here. It's kind of a cool old mill. Yeah. And ended up getting people from all over the world painting it. And somebody did it in wool, felted wool, right? So they did their picture that way. Right. And, other people were sort of just sketching it, and other people were doing it in a bold acrylic. Other people, would draw little people working on the boards with a hammer and stuff. So they were just getting really creative.
Yeah,
with
it sounds amazing.
Right.
Is it just like someone posts a picture, just a general feed with, we're going to do this, and maybe a hashtag?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right?
Like hashtags, right? You learn that as you go, like what the hashtags will do. And then we've got a fellow in Paris who will share them every Friday. He'll share a whole bunch, like, sort of 6 or 9.
Was a kind of an overseer of the situation. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just helping. He just happens to have a whole lot of followers, and so he's got an audience. So he's like, well, here, I'll share all of these challenges everyone's been putting out, so I can go into Google Translate and go, can you share my challenge?
Right.
And he can read it.
Yeah. I know, it's
Right.
wonderful what we
Yeah.
have today.
Yeah. And some of
Right.
the local people, some of them started doing it too. So I don't think there were really people in my community here didn't really seem to know about the challenges.
Uh-huh.
And I just happened to have found out about them. It's like this global community came into my community and sort of held their hand and said, hey, come on
that's
over here and
great.
play, right? And so then there's this nice flow back and forth, and it's nice, right? When I see my local people,
Getting in with your international
working with
people.
and it's like, oh, that's like
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Now, how did you meet the people locally?
Gee, probably posting local things and using local hashtags, and some of my earlier paintings were local landmarks, like little, it's a mom and pop restaurant. It's been in Waterloo for this long. And then maybe the city of Waterloo would share that because I'd put in a hashtag that was like City Waterloo or whatever. And then they'd share it. And then some of those people would say, oh, she's a local person. Who's she? Right. And they go in and find you that way.
Yeah.
Or like I did a painting from a local butcher shop. I sort of did their storefront, which has this big, weird Angus cow in a kilt playing baseball mural in the front window. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I kind of have to paint that. It was just brutal to do. So I try to put a little story with everything, right? So I have a story, my history with the little butcher shop on Instagram. And then the butcher shop shares it on his stuff and says, oh my gosh, look at this. This is awesome. And then all these other local people, everybody knows the butcher shop. So they start diving in, and that's so other artists find me and just other people. And surprisingly enough, all these people wanted pictures of the butcher shop. And it's like people want to hang a picture of the butcher shop in their home. But
it has good memories attached to it, especially. Yeah.
And then, other artists, you'll meet them because you'll see them doing shows locally, and you'll stop and talk to them and kind of go, hey, well, like I'm on Instagram, you're on Instagram. Same thing people used to do with Facebook. Maybe they still do. I don't know.
So you got out of your shell a little bit, it sounds like, in going to the shows and talking to people.
Yeah, it's been actually really good for me to get out of my shell, because I think I was getting, like, I have a tendency to sort of turn inward a bit.
Sure.
And just keep to myself, and think nobody probably is interested in talking to me at all.
Yeah.
And so having these communities, I don't know, maybe I do have some value. Who knows?
Right, prove to you otherwise. Yes.
Yeah. I do remember making a very conscious decision, maybe a year and a half ago now. I looked at my Instagram site and I saw what was happening with other artists, and I thought, nobody knows who I am. I need to let my personality come in, which was one of the scariest things I ever did, right? So I started kind of putting some little jokes in my write-ups.
Yeah.
And a very conscious effort to just sort of add personality to my site, because I thought, well, worst case scenario, we'll just shut the site down, right? If the personality is a bad thing, and it was well received. That's when the conversations started happening, and it would just get kind of funny.
Yeah.
So then it was just kind of a free for all, and the jokes just didn't stop. But I had to actually get myself out of my shell, just try, right? Which very much out of character for me to put myself out there, but I'm glad I did.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were reaching out, you were having conversations, you were showing your personality, you were letting yourself be open so people could become familiar with you.
Yeah, and getting a little goofier with the art and stuff, and stopping using a ruler when I was drawing.
Oh, okay. So there was kind of a parallel between what you were doing with your art and what you were doing with yourself socially.
Yeah, so I guess I was just maybe trying to expand a little.
Yeah.
Naturally, it was just time to expand. I don't know.
I love that.
And then it's like, well, okay, so I'm not using a ruler now, and so now my building goes this way. But that's okay.
It completely works with your stuff. Yeah. If your stuff was straight, I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
It would be such a different thing.
It lacks something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if somebody wanted to get online and find a community for themselves and the challenges and that kind of thing, Do you have any advice on what to look for, what kind of hashtags to use, or any of that kind of information?
Yeah. Oh, well, so for challenges, they could follow me and I can help them. I always help people because people will ask me, like, how did you do that? Or they'll say, how do you find these, right? Or
Yeah.
they'll see me do a challenge and then somebody who's not in the challenge group will paint it anyways, right? So,
Why don't you give us your Instagram tag?
oh, it's at Megan's Brushstrokes. So MEGANSBRUSH. This is a bad idea.
The second half's a little easier. Yes,
STROKES.
yeah, here you go. Got it. Okay,
Yeah, so
at Megan's Brushstrokes.
yeah, I can sort of get you set up, get anybody set up with where the challenges that I know about are. But then there's always other ones that come in because once you do a challenge, then the other people who do that challenge will come in and they'll go, oh, I like how you did that challenge. That's pretty cool. And
Yeah.
they'll follow you and then you get them in your group. And if you say a few kind words or comment on any of their stuff, then you kind of get some chats going. It's just nobody needs to be lonely.
Oh, that's great.
It's right there. Like I don't even actually have a computer. Right? Everything's just on my phone and there's no
Right.
expectations.
So everything you're doing just kind of meshes together. You go out and you bike and you get
Yeah.
your fitness in, and then you do your painting, and then you have this community that you know is going to support you locally and otherwise. What a great setup.
Yeah,
yeah.
it is. It's just been such a surprise.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and kind of wrap up with some of these closing questions I tend to ask everybody. One, how do you feed your muse? What kind of things do you do to keep yourself inspired?
Wow. Okay. So obviously the challenges give me a constant
Right.
flow, but I've also found urban sketchers from all over the world.
Cool.
Like the little coffee shop that I was saying I did with the little TVs. So it was him standing outside this coffee shop drawing it. But I like the coffee shop. So then it's like, oh, can I use your picture? That's an awesome picture.
Yeah.
And so then, of course, he's like, sure, yeah, like go nuts, right? Because people like to have their stuff appreciated. We like to
Exactly.
share.
Sure.
I don't know what it is about sharing an art, but it's important. If you're not sharing it, I don't know. What's the point?
Yeah, everybody has their own ideas, but I think for many of us, it is a way to connect to other people, if not in the fashion of I want to share my aesthetic or my vision or the things that I enjoy with other people through creating things in art and sharing those out publicly or selling or whatnot. I mean, some people just want to do it for the act of creating in and of itself. But obviously for you, this is extremely important and you've really built your kind of world around communities.
Yeah, it's important, right? Like
Yeah.
I've sort of dabbled in selling art this year. It doesn't give me a lot of joy, but sharing it with people and having people approach me and tell me how much they love my stuff, and some 20-year-old coming to where my daughter works and going, I love your mom's stuff. It's like a 20-year-old boy in university going, everything she does, I love. And I'm thinking, a 20-year-old boy.
Yeah. Well, that whimsical view of life is universal.
Who knew?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like sort of this broad appeal, which is just very satisfying.
Yeah,
That's much more satisfying than selling something.
Yeah.
So,
Well, do you have any new or novel experiences or anything unusual to share with the listeners?
really, I've just kind of tried to embrace the mundane around me.
Oh, okay.
Right. So, that's when my partner had suggested, why don't you paint stuff around here that we see every day when we're out biking and hiking? And I thought, the heck? Why
Yeah.
would I want to do that? And I mean, some days you're not going to very exciting, glamorous places. Sometimes
Right.
it's a garbage can and a lamppost.
Yeah.
But if you kind of play with that stuff a little bit, or say, that's actually kind of a cool alley over there
Yeah.
in downtown. Nobody pays attention to the alley, but I look down that alley every single day on my way to work or
Yeah.
when I'm walking to here. Like today, when I found myself walking down under the road I was walking along and going down to where the train tracks are and all the graffiti under the bridge and
Yeah.
sketching that. And I thought, what am I doing down here?
Whoops.
Right. It's
Wait a
like
minute.
graffiti, it's train tracks. It's like, but there's some beauty in it. And it's
Yeah.
just part of my world. Like I always look down at it as I'm going over the bridge. I'm always like, wow, that's cool graffiti down
Yeah.
there. And it's funny because when you appreciate what's outside your front door, it's very satisfying.
It sounds like also the new and novel experience isn't so much about going and finding something you haven't seen or haven't done, but that you're looking at the things that you do see every day in a new way. So you find what's new about it.
Yeah, right. And so this desire to actually do something local once a week, that, sometimes at certain times of year, especially when I walk and bike most places, like
Yeah.
I'm not really going to drive a long way to find something. So it's like, it's got to be accessible to me. And so it's like, what am I going to
Yeah.
paint this week? Right. And then it'll be like, okay, come on, Ron, let's go look at this and we'll find some stuff and see if there's anything over there down that path.
Yeah.
I've seen the path a million times. Let's go explore that. Or he'll
Right.
say, let's go this way and we'll go to the market. Maybe you'd see something in the market you'd like to paint, right? And
Yeah.
so we're always kind of going, what do I want to sketch, right?
Right.
That I haven't already sketched because I don't just want to do the same thing over and over again.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. But sometimes I do the same thing and I'll do a comparison and say, oh, I did this a year ago and now this is me here. Like, look at the difference, right? So you don't
Right.
even realize you're growing, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of fun to see.
Well, it sounds like, you're forcing yourself to see the world in a new view. Yeah, that's great. And then the last and I think most important question for all artists, what is your definition of success for your art and your artistic journey? I mean, you're on the beer can and you're in the park.
I
So
know.
you got those things down.
that was originally my definition. Right now, it's just making people smile. The fact that my art just makes people kind of happy.
Yeah.
That's not what I was ever aiming for. I was just kind of doing what I do, I guess. And the fact that it makes people giggle, like I did sort of a one-man show, which I was a little overwhelmed by. It was too much, and I thought, this is terrible. But I had sort of filled this great big huge room with my art, and I came in to check on how it was doing. I was there for a couple months, and I came in, and there was these two elderly ladies all dolled up for an evening out, right? So they're sitting back on the couch, and they said, oh, are you the artist? And they just talked to me forever and about how much they loved the art, right?
Oh.
And nobody was talking about buying the art. They were just sitting there enjoying it because it was fun
Yeah.
and it was vibrant and it just made them so happy. And of course, they have ideas about places I should sketch, right? Because
Yeah.
as soon as people see that you're painting a lot of local stuff, they go, oh, you should do this place
Yeah.
before they tear it down because, oh, do you remember, and then they have little stories to go with that. And it's kind
Yeah.
of like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. And it brought nothing but joy to them. And they were just sitting there having a great time before they deciding where they were going to go for dinner.
Yeah.
And
And it kind of made their night. Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful.
Right.
That's like the best thing, just to see somebody happy or smiling, and their day
Enjoying
or
it.
their life or whatever is a little bit better because of what you're doing.
yeah, that's success.
Okay.
So,
Well, before we sign off, we've told them your Instagram at Megan's Brushstrokes. Is there anywhere they can buy your work or any other links or sites that they should know about to find you?
oh, well, like I do have an Etsy shop called Megan's Brushstrokes. That's about the
Okay.
only places I am.
That's
that's
plenty.
enough.
Yes.
That's enough.
Right? Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is a great conversation. You've really
Huh.
inspired me. I
Oh,
think I don't
wow.
reach out enough. Like you, I'm fairly shy. But I think I'm going to try reaching out on Instagram more as well and my local community. And I'm sure you've inspired a lot of people that were listening. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Megan. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for finding me, however you found me, and
Well, you
invite me
put
along.
yourself out there. That's how I found
Oh,
you.
oh.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you got as much out of that conversation as I did. It really got me thinking about how involved I am in communities, both locally and online. I mean, I'm always working. I'm always busy. I don't feel like I have the time to make that kind of connection for myself. And that's probably really to my detriment. So I'm going to work on that. I'm going to search out challenges, which I did after that conversation. If you want to look for challenges for yourself, now Megan offered to help direct you to the ones that she knows about. And what I was able to see through her pages is that it's a lot of sketching and drawing. So if you're drawing, painting, sketching, 2D visual arts, she probably can help you out with that. Otherwise, it looked like you can just Google challenges. There's people who put out these lists. So putting in art challenge and the type of medium that you work in or kind of general area of art that you work in should bring you up some lists of potential challenges on Instagram primarily. That's the biggest one. Twitter has some as well. And then locally, going to art openings and art walks and networking with groups on Meetup, or you could look for guilds. If there are guilds in your area, there are usually some kind of guilds or organizations that promote and support your particular medium and your particular art form, so you can look for those as well. So some ideas, just think about what you might need from community. If you need more community, if you need more connection to something larger than yourself, your little circle, whatever it is that you work with at this time. But yeah, I just thought that was a fantastic conversation. I'm really looking forward to checking all those options out. And that actually dovetails into some ideas that I'd been thinking about for a while now. It would be great if we could build a community of people who like to discuss the types of subjects talked about on the podcast, but maybe more extensively and with some back and forth and the ability to ask questions and stuff, right? And to do this in order to better our lives as creatives, not just in our techniques and our medium and selling, but all the other things. There's so many other aspects to our lives as artists. So I had thought about doing something where we could get together maybe online and have discussions or create together. Now, I used to have a group in Denver, friends mostly, that we would get together and do something called a stitch and bitch. Sorry for the language. But if you've done those before, it's just basically getting together and doing what you do while you talk. Now, in Megan's case, she would get together with other folks at coffee shops or wherever and sketch, which is great because it's very portable. If you're in a craft art or a messy art form, sometimes it's harder to take your work out with you. So there seems to be online opportunities for that. I was thinking maybe I can make that one of the things that I can do for you folks. So if you are interested in expanding kind of the Sage Arts community, let me know what it is that you would like and the kind of things that you would like to see and the formats in which you would like to see them. Any input on that would be great. It's not something I can really dive into until later in May because the first half of May is kind of full. But let's talk about it. Tell me what you'd like. Tell me if you want to have conversations, if you want to have group art sessions together. And I'll see what we can set up. And it may involve some kind of membership thing just because there are services that I would need to employ that will add additional financial burdens to the process and the project. But I'm happy to do it. And let's see what we can come up with. So with that on your mind, put yourself out there, have more active conversations online, put more of your personality out there, try some challenges and see what kind of community you can build. And then reach out to people locally. And I hope that brings you the kind of community that you might be looking for. In the meantime, if you go out and do that kind of thing and locally or even online, those are new and novel experiences that will help feed your muse. So do feed your muse with those new experiences. Be true to your weirdness and join me again next week on the Sage Arts podcast. Community you can build and then reach out to people locally. And I hope that brings you the kind of community that you might be looking for. In the meantime, if you go out and do that kind of thing and locally or even online, those are new and novel experiences that will help feed your muse. So do feed your muse with those new experiences. Be true to your weirdness and join me again next week on the Sage Arts podcast.